Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Kaf Gimel. We get to start the third chapter of Masechah Sanhedrin. So hold on just a second. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. So the third chapter returns to the very topic that we began with. In fact, it opens with the same words. I haven't done a search through all of Shas, but the vast majority of chapters in Shas are named after the first words of the Mishnah. But this one can't be because the first words of this Mishnah are identical to the first words of the opening chapter. And the opening chapter uses those words, those exact same three words, to for the name of that chapter. So let's get started. Dine Mamonos B'Shlosha. That should sound familiar. That's how our whole Masechah began. We say that we need three judges in order to judge monetary cases. So what's the process? So now Zeb Borer Lo Echad, this one chooses one. Zeb Borer Lo Echad, this one chooses one. We're going to assume at the moment that Zeb Borer Lo Echad means that when we say this one chooses one, that we're talking about the litigants making a choice. But what is the one? Well, we're going to, for the moment, as Rashi says, Zeborolo echad, mashme zeborolo bastin echad. This one chooses an entire bastin. Echad, bastin echad. Shehain gimel, which is three people. B'zeh echad, and this one chooses another three people. Hare shisha. Now you have six total people. Ushneim borin lahem od echad, and then those two, and then the two of them, the two litigants together, they choose another Beit Din jointly. Hare tet. Now you end up with nine people. V'hainu dekamatama mai borer. That's what the question is when we say the Gemara is going to open with, I don't understand what we're talking about here. What do you mean that each of them is choosing a Beit Din? Ha b'tlasa sagi. We know that all you need is three judges, and now you've ended up with nine. That's the question. So that's the understanding. But of course, we can now, let's back up and just say, what is it going to, where are we going to end up? It's going to be Zer Borolo Echad. This one chooses one judge. V'Zer Borolo Echad. This one chooses one judge. Ushnei and Borin Lehen Odechad. And then the two of them together choose, agree upon a third judge. Divrei Rebbe Meir. That's what Rebbe Meir says. V'chachamim omrim shnei dayanin boren lehen odechad. No, it's the two judges that select the third judge. So Zeb Posel. All right, so that's issue number one and machlokas number one in our Mishnah. We're going to spend most of the day today analyzing that machlokas in the Gemara. Zeb Posel dayano shel Zeb. Zeb Posel dayano shel Zeb. Each one has the ability to disqualify the judge chosen by the other. Divrei Rebbe Meir. That's what Rebbe Meir says, and we'll see. We're going to analyze what exactly that means. The Chachamim say no. Amasai, when is it possible to disqualify the judges? Bisman shemevi alehen raya shehein krovim opsulin. Only when you bring proof that one of the litigants are related to the judge, or the judge is ineligible to serve because he's violates some rule, whether it's he's actually a slave or something else that's to be determined. But that the point is that they're not eligible to serve as a judge. Aval im hayuk sheirim, but if they are kosher umumchim, or they are mumchin, has meant that they had smicha, but we'll talk now about just experts. Mipi based in, they're considered experts from or certified by based in. So then Enu Yachol Poslan. Then you can't disqualify them. So that is the second machlokus in our Mishnah that relates to the ability to disqualify judges. Zeh posel edav shel zeh, v'zeh posel edav shel zeh. Each one has the ability to disqualify the witnesses that they're brought by the other litigant. Divrei Rebbe Meir. That's what Rebbe Meir says. And the Chachamim again limit it. When is it true? Bisman shemevi alei and raya. Only when they bring proof. Shehein krovin opsulin. When that there's some relations between them, that they're related in a way that's going to be too close, that they'd be biased, or they're puzzled, meaning that they are not eligible, they're invalid to serve as witnesses. But if they're kosher, the litigants don't have the ability to disqualify them. And we will spend the end of today talking about what exactly that means, and we will give at least 3 explanations, and the fourth one will have to wait for tomorrow. All right, so let's get into the Gemara now. So again, the Gemara is going to explain the second 2 debates. So if in fact they are not clear, that's I don't know, intentional is probably not the right word, but that's okay, because we're going to define them, and they need to be defined in the Gemara. But again, let's begin with the question that Rashi highlights for us. The Rashi explains the Mishnah in order for us to be able to understand. What is meant by each one choosing one? Because if in fact everybody's choosing 3, you end up with 9. But sagi, but 3 is sufficient. So that's why Rashi explains it the way he does. Tosfos offers a slightly different explanation. But the bottom line is that the question is, how are we engaging in this selection process? So Hachikamar. So first we're going to lean in to the concept of each one choosing one, meaning each one is choosing a beis din, an entire beis din. But then we will reject that in the end. So this is just the Havamina. So Hachikamer, maybe this is what the Mishnah is saying. When each one chooses a different court, well, then what do you do? Then neither of the first 2 courts work. They have to rather choose a third court that works for both of them. So, lova matzi ma'akev. 1 second. That seems to suggest that even a borrower has the ability to object to the court that the plaintiff, that the creditor uses to bring his case. But we are going to see that Rebbe Lazar says that that's not true, because he says lo shanu when we talk about an ability of a litigant to reject a local court and require going to an expert court. Lo shanu elamalva. That is only the creditor. The plaintiff has the ability to say, listen, I don't want to use our local court. They are less sophisticated than the court over there in New York City, where we're just the boondocks. And then in New York City, they got much more sophisticated courts. That's where I want to go. The creditor has the ability to do that. Avalova kofinoso v'dan be'iro. But when the borrower wants to do that, if the creditor says, no, I want to litigate in my boondock city, I want to stay here, I'm not interested in traveling, we listen to the creditor. So doesn't that show that this explanation of our Mishnah does not hold? Because it can't be that always when each party chooses a different court, they have to choose a third court. If the creditor were to choose a local court and the borrower were to choose a faraway court, the creditor would have the right to insist on the local court. So Keda'am Rabbi Yochanan Ba'arkos Shebesur Yashanu. All right, you know what? We're still going to be talking about choosing courts, but we are going to say that we're dealing with a situation like Rabbi Yochanan is going to give an answer in a different case. That what did he say? He said in a different case that that the courts are like the secular courts, the regular courts of Surya. And Rashi tells us, but our Surya, we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 11, 12 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi, beginning of the line, Barakos Surya, Shelo Hayabikian Bedin Torah. They weren't expert in Torah knowledge. Hilchak Afilu Lova Matzi Ma'akiv. And so in that situation, we do allow a borrower to say, I don't want to go to the same court. So what is the answer that we're giving right now is we're saying So hachanami, but our kos shebasuria shanu. So back into the Gemara here too. Let's say that we're talking about the courts of Surya, and we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 lines up from the narrowest lines of the Gemara. And so as a result, that's what we're talking about. Aval mumchin, but if we go to the 10th line up in the narrow lines, but when it comes to experts, when it comes to those who have been have had have been ordained, so then that you would not be able to do it. So what are we explaining? So what's our current understanding of our Mishnah? It's the following. I choose a group of unexpert judges over here. Stan chooses another set of non-expert judges over there. So in that situation, both of us don't like the non-expert judges that each other chose. So in that situation, we would need to choose together a third set, and that would be our set of judges. Rav Papa says, no, we don't have to answer it that way. Again, the question is, I thought we said that a debtor has the ability, that a creditor can force a court on a debtor. So how is it possible to understand our Mishnah and say that both the creditor and the debtor are choosing different courts, and we force them to come up with a third choice? So Rav Papa Amar, afilu tema mumchin. No, we can say that actually both Stan and I chose expert courts, kagon beidina de Rav Huna de Rav Chisda. But it's a situation where the two courts are in the same area. De Amarle, because if I'm the creditor and Stan is the debtor, and so Stan can say to me, "Mika mitrachnolach," am I imposing anything on you? Of course not. They're both in the same. Maybe they're even in the same building. Rashi goes so far as to say, "The tarbayo bechad makom." They're both in the same place. So Tosfos notes, however, that because there was a student-teacher relationship between Rav Huna and Rav Chisda, that maybe that couldn't be. But the bottom line is that Stan is not asking too much of me, and therefore, in that situation, maybe we would allow the debtor to insist on a different court and force the two of us to come up with a third option. Okay, so now we've given two different ways that we can understand our Mishnah based on the concept that when Stan and I are litigating, we're each initially choosing a court, and then because we chose different courts, we have to choose a third court. But now we're going to reject that. So Tanan, listen to what the next opinion is. One second. The rabbis tell us that they who argue on Rebbe Meir say that the two judges select one more. And if you tell me that we're talking about choosing Beit Din, that we're choosing the judge, the entire court, Beit Din Basar de Pasle Lahu Azlu Uvaru Lahu Beit Dina Achrina. It doesn't make any sense that what's going to happen is our two rejected courts are now going to choose the third court. No, that doesn't make any sense. V'od, my zeb borer lo echad v'zeb borer lo echad. Also, the language of each one choosing one suggests an affirmative requirement, not that this is what happened. You might have, if we had said, im zeb borer echad v'zeb borer echad, then fine, I can understand that we're talking about an if case where we chose different courts. But this seems to be an affirmative requirement saying that Stan has to choose one of something and I have to choose one of something. So that doesn't make sense in the context of choosing an entire court. Elahachi kamar. So we therefore reject our first understanding completely, and we say the following: Kishezeb borer lo dayan echad, b'zeb borer lo dayan echad, shneihen borerin lehen od echad. When Stan chooses Judge A, I choose Judge B. Well, then Stan and I work together to choose Judge C. What's the purpose, or what's the difference in making this choice in this way? So I'll tell you, Amri b'mar Rabba, they say in Israel, Mishmei de Rebbe Zera, in the name of Rebbe Zera, Mitosh zebar lo dayan echad, v'zebar lo dayan echad, ushnein borin lehen od echad, yetzeg hadin la'amito. Because I chose a judge and Stan chose a judge, and we together chose the third judge, that's how we know. That's how we can be confident that we are going to come out in a positive direction. So, as Rashi tells us, it's about a little less than halfway down in the narrow lines of Rashi. Yetze din emet lamito did saite bale dinin, that the litigants will obey the court decision. Disavar hachayev, because the one who is made liable will think, Harayani ba'atzmi birarti echad, I personally chose one of the judges. If he could have found a way to find for me, he would have done so. Meaning, now, some people understand this, that actually the court judges who are chosen by the litigants should act as lawyers effectively for the litigants. But that is not the way most Rishonim understand this, but rather the point is it's a logical, it's a psychological concept. That of course, if I'm chosen by one of the litigants, I want to be unbiased, but I'm going to naturally have certain inclinations to be thinking about the court case from their perspective. And even the judges themselves will feel better about the outcome. Because each two of them were chosen, everybody was chosen, that they're all going to be comfortable with the outcome. So as a result, that's the situation. And so we've redefined and come to the conclusion that our Mishnah is actually talking about where litigant A chooses Judge 1, litigant B chooses Judge 2, and the litigants together choose Judge 3. So now that we said that, now we have to explain the Gemara according to the Chachamim and how they disagree with Rebbe Meir. So that's the next piece of the Gemara. The Chachamim Omrim. So we had the quote from the Chachamim. Nema b'de Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav kif miflagi. Maybe what Rebbe Meir and the Chachamim are arguing about is really the statement about that Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav. Dam Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav ein ha'edim chosmin al hashtar ela imkein yodim michosim imahem. That witnesses should not sign on a document unless they know who else is signing with them. First of all, by the way, that's great advice. Don't sign on anything unless you know who else is signing. Okay, so how do we, if we say that, how do we align Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim? Rebbe Meir leislei derav. Rebbe Meir says, listen, it's not that important. Now, what's the analogy of witnesses not signing without knowing who the other witnesses are? The analogy in our case is judges shouldn't agree to judge unless they know who the third judge is. So the point is, Rebbe Meir says that the litigants get to choose the third judge. That implies that the judges don't, because the Chachamim said that the judges choose the third judge. So maybe Rebbe Meir is disagreeing with Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav, and so again, Rebbe Meir leislei to Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, and Rabbanan Islahu to Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, and the rabbis do agree to Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav. So doesn't this align perfectly with our Mishnah? So doesn't it make sense to say that that's exactly what they're arguing about? You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. To Kuliyama Islahu to Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. Really, Rabbi Yehuda would say everybody, or Rav would say everybody agrees with me. Now, of course, Rav, we say often Rav Tana Upalik. Rav can argue with the Tana, and of course, in this case, he would be in agreement with the Chachamim. But the bottom line is that he can actually say that even Rebbe Meir would agree to my principle. V'das hadayanin kuliyamalo pligi debinan. How do you understand our Mishnah? Our Mishnah is not saying that the litigants choose and force the third judge on the first two judges. Rather, what it's saying is that, of course, the first two judges have to be okay with it, but we also need the litigant to be involved. Ki pligi das bale dinin. It's the argument in our Mishnah is about whether the litigants have a right. Rabbi Meir savar das bale dinin nami be'inan. Rabbi Meir says you also need the litigants to approve the judge. The Rabbanan Savre das hadayanan be'inan, das bale dinin lo be'inan. No, you only need the consent of the judges. You do not need the consent of the litigants. So we had originally thought that maybe you would need both, that the argument was reversed. But now we say, no, the argument is that Rabbi Meir says you need both the litigants and the judges, and Rabbanan say, the Chachamim say, that no, the judges are sufficient. Okay, so now we have a full understanding of the first machlokes of our Mishnah. The machlokes is about how you choose individual judges, and the question is that Rabbi Meir says that both the litigants and the judge need to approve it, and and the Chachamim say, no, it is sufficient to just have the judges approve.
This is just for monetary cases, yes?
Yes, this is talking about monetary cases. That's exactly right. Those were the opening words, 100%. So
what is the formula of Reb Meir then? Would the litigants and the judges all meet together in one room, or would the litigants first select and then the judges approve, or would the judges first select the third one and the litigants approve?
It's the middle case that you gave. The litigants would select, and the judges have to also agree to serve even after they know that the third judge has been selected. So they would have the right to say, I'm not judging with that judge, and therefore step back. So before we go to the third machlokes, I realize we have one more point to do. And Gufa, this statement of Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, Ein ha'edim chosman al hashtar, that this concept of witnesses not signing on a document, you know what? We can see that in a brisa. Tanya nami haki. We have a similar brisa. Again, not identical, but similar. Kachayu nikiye hadas shibrushalaim osim. Here is great advice. Here's what the clean-minded, the wise, the good-thinking people in Yerushalayim would do. They don't sign on a document unless they know who's signing with them. They didn't judge unless they knew who else was judging with them. And they didn't go to a party, to a dinner, if they didn't know who else was going to be sitting with them. Wise words. The point is that you want to be, you don't want to be associated with people with whom you don't want to be associated.
Makes sense.
And the only way you can do that is by ensuring that you know who you're associating with. Okay. So that was, again, machlokes number 1. Zeh posel daino. So now we quote again from our Mishnah. And we are at the 2 dots, 3 lines down in the wide lines of Kaf Gimel Amud Aleph. So, kol kimine de pasel dayane. 1 second. What right does anybody have to disqualify judges? So, Rabbi Yochanan, right? Remember we quoted Rabbi Yochanan a little while ago, and we tried to apply him to the first part of our Mishnah. Well, here is the original teaching. Rabbi Yochanan says that we're talking about courts of Syria. And when you're talking of, meaning if Stan were to choose a judge from a court of Syria, meaning he chooses somebody who has no Torah knowledge, doesn't have any understanding of the nature of the case, well, then I do have the right to object to that selection. Aval mumchen lo. But if he chooses somebody who is ordained and has an expertise, well, then I don't have the right to object to his to his selection. One second. So, Aval Mumchin Lo, 1 second. Are you telling me that Rebbe Meir does not allow the rejection of an expert judge? Hamid de Katani Seva. Listen carefully to the words that the Chachamim say. The Chachamim Omrim Emasai. When is it that they can reject a judge? Bisman shemevi raya shehein krovin opsulin, when they bring proof that only when they bring proof that they are related or invalid. Aval im hayu ksherim o mumchin mipi beisdin enu yachal poslan. But when they are a kosher, when they're valid, when they're good judges, or they are experts, meaning that they have a smicha or some kind of expertise, so then maybe based in from Beit Din, so then Eino Yachol Poslan. Well, then you can't disqualify them. But that implies Miklal de Rabbi Meir Mumchinami Kamar. That implies that Rabbi Meir would allow the disqualification of an expert judge. So, Hachi Kamar, let's clarify what the Chachamim were trying to say, and that way we'll see that actually both that Rabbi Meir does not disagree with respect to the ability to disqualify expert judges. Aval im hayu ksherim. What they were saying is, if in fact the witness is the judge is a kosher witness, meaning a kosher judge, he could be a judge. There's no legal impediment. Well, then nasu kimumchin. Then we make him like he's an expert. Mipi Beit Din, with Beit Din certification. Ve'enu yachol poslan, and therefore he cannot be disqualified unless there is actual proof of him being related or ineligible. So that is, we've now offered one explanation for this, how we can discuss disqualifying a judge. But we're not going to end there. Rather, we're going to, we're going to next go to ask, but Tashma, Amru lo Rabbi Meir, we have a brisa that continues the conversation between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. So if you're rereading our Mishnah, okay, but listen to the continuation of the conversation. That the Chachamim said to Rabbi Meir, "Lo kol heimena sheposel dayan shemumcha l'rabim." That a litigant does not have the power to disqualify a judge who has been determined to be an expert judge for the public. So doesn't that show that Rebbe Meir says that you can disqualify an expert judge? Again, Ema, no, we can reread that also. Lo kol heimena sheposel dayan shahamuchuhu shehimchuhu rabim aleihim. No, it's not that the judge has been declared an expert for the public, but rather the public has said that we want to treat this person like an expert judge, but they don't have any kind of certification and are not, in fact, true experts. And that's the situation where the Rebbe Meir and the Chachamim disagree. And Tanya Nami Haki, and actually we have a brisa that supports this understanding of Rabbi Yochanan's explanation of our Mishnah. La'olam posel v'holich, a litigant has the ability to reject a judge chosen by the other party until he accepts upon himself to accept the judges in a court that is publicly acknowledged as expert, meaning Divrei Rebbe Meir, meaning that at least when it comes to identifying the situation where Rebbe Meir says the person can't retract an approval. You can't retract approval when you do so in an expert court. So that shows that an expert, similarly, and the judge won't allow the rejection of an expert directly. So vaha edim kamumchim dame. But 1 second, but all witnesses. Now let's take a look at the end, and we're going to now jump to the third case of our Mishnah and say all witnesses are considered like experts. And yet, what did we say? We said that Rebbe Meir allows a litigant to nullify and disqualify witnesses brought by the other party. The Amar Rebbe Meir, Zeb posel Edav shel Zeb, Zeb posel Edav shel Zeb. Rebbe Meir allows that disqualification. So if witnesses are treated like mumchim, so witnesses are treated like experts, so then, and we say that Rebbe Meir says you cannot disqualify an expert judge, how can he say that you can disqualify witnesses? Witnesses are treated like experts. Doesn't this show that, in fact, our explanation of the second machlokes has to be wrong? And so what we're going to do now is we're going to offer 4 answers to the question of effectively how Rabbi Yochanan can explain the third argument in our Mishnah in a way that's consistent with his explanation of the second argument. Again, he explains that the second argument is that Rebbe Meir says you can disqualify non-expert judges, but not expert judges, right. And the Chachamim say you can't disqualify you can't disqualify any kosher judge, even if they're not an expert, unless they have some kind of psul. So that's the way Rabbi Yochanan explained it. But then we had a problem because Rebbe Meir says that you can disqualify witnesses, and witnesses are considered like expert judges. So how do we understand that? So we're going to now reinterpret the third case of our Mishnah. We're going to give 3 different approaches today, and the 4th will be for tomorrow. So ha'itmar Allah amaresh lakish peh kadosh yomar davar zeh. Could such a holy mouth as Rebbe Meir say something that would clearly be wrong, meaning that you can disqualify witnesses? So Tanei Edo, change it to a single witness, his witness singular. So Edolamai. So okay, so you want to tell me that the machlokes is about the ability to disqualify a single witness, not multiple witnesses, because multiple witnesses would be treated like experts, but a single witness might not. What's the case? So, if you tell me that the witness is allowing the collection of money, Rachmana Pasle, the Torah itself tells us that one witness is insufficient to collect money. And Ila Shvua, and if you were telling me that the one witness is causing the defendant to swear, hey Monet, Mehemen Kibetre, that a witness is believed to like 2 witnesses, meaning that they are able to make a defendant swear. So la'olam mamon. Really, I'll tell you, it is about a monetary case. And lo tzricha dekable alei kebetre. And the situation is the following: Stan and I are litigants. I have a claim for $1,000 against Stan, and Stan and I say, listen. I say to Stan, listen. I am willing to accept in this case that one witness is like 2 witnesses, and Stan says the same thing back to me. In this case, I'm willing to accept one witness like 2 witnesses. And now what happens? I bring a witness that says that Stan owes me the $1,000. And Stan says, you know what? I don't want to believe in one witness anymore. I want 2 witnesses. So that's the situation. So Rebbe Meir says, yes, Stan has the right to undo his statement and cancel and say, I don't want to accept 2 witnesses. And the Chachamim say no. So my Kamash Malan. So what is Rebbe Meir teaching us? Dematzi Hadarbe, that the litigant has the ability to retract his acceptance. But Tanina, we already learned that in another Mishnah. So Amar Lo, because we have if one litigant says Neman alai Abba, Neman alai Avicha, Neman alai Gimel Roe Vakar, if Stan says that he's willing to have his own father or my father or 3 cattle shepherds serve as judges. Rabbi Meir Omer Yachal Lachzor. Rabbi Meir says that that Stan has the ability to retract his commitment. The Chachamim Omer Einu Yachal Lachzor, and the Chachamim say he can't. So why is this any different from that case? Moreover, V'amar Rav Dimi Brei de Rav Nachman Brei de Rav Yosef Kagon de Kable Alei B'chad. And specifically, we're dealing with a situation where, in the father case, the Stan agrees that the father would serve as one of 3 judges. Tosos explains why we need this statement of Rav Dimi, but maybe if we have time at the end, we can go back to it. But the bottom line is we see this same teaching in a future Mishnah. And so as a result, why do we need this Mishnah? Is a Mishnah that we're going to learn, I guess, God willing, tomorrow, that says that is effectively teaching the same thing, that just as as Stan has the right to go back on saying that he wants his father to be a judge, he can go back on wanting on being willing to accept 1 witness instead of 2 witnesses, according to Rebbe Meir. No, Sricha, we actually need both cases. Because if we only had the Mishnah that taught about the father and my father and your father, maybe it's only there that the rabbis say you can't retract. Because my father and Stan's father are both eligible to being judges. They just can't be judges for us.
Yeah.
But they could be judges for other people. But maybe when the rabbis see in the case of 1 witness being allowed instead of 2 witnesses, maybe they would say, Amen Moda Leila Rabbi Meir. Maybe they would agree to Rabbi Meir that the litigants can go back on that commitment. And if we just had our case of the 2 of an agreement to allow 1 witness instead of 2 witnesses, maybe Bahakam or Rebbe Meir. Maybe it's only in that case that Rebbe Meir would disagree. But in the case of the fathers, maybe they would agree with the rabbis that you can retract, because after all, those fathers are good judges for other people. So once we say that we're okay with them serving as judges for us, maybe even Rebbe Meir would not retract. So tzricha, therefore we need both. So, Hadmedikatani Resha Dayano Besefa Edav. 1 second, though. In the middle case of our Mishnah, we specifically say that we have the ability to reject a single judge, that each litigant has the ability to reject the single judge chosen. Besefa Edav. And the end of that Mishnah, the end of our Mishnah, refers to witnesses in plural. How can you, Reish Lakish, say that we should change the wording of our Mishnah? It seems from the wording of our Mishnah that it was very intentional in saying witnesses plural. So therefore, we are rejecting Reish Lakish's approach, and we're going to say Alma Davka Katani. So it clearly was intentional that it used the word plural witnesses. So as a result, we cannot give this answer, and we now need to give 2 other answers. So we're going to give the next answer, and so let's go to that. So that's Rebbe Lazar's answer. Oops, I wrote A4 for Rav Dimi. It should be A3, but I'll fix that. Okay.
What was the answer again that we're rejecting?
The answer that we are rejecting is that when we say that a litigant can reject the witnesses of the other party, what we meant is the witness of the other party. And what we're dealing with was a case where both of the litigants agreed to accept 1 witness instead of 2, and Reish Lakish says that that's the case where Rebbe Meir and the Chachamim disagree. Rebbe Meir says that the litigants can retract their acceptance of that single witness, of their willingness to accept a single witness, where the Chachamim say no, they cannot. Once they agreed to accept 1 witness in place of 2 witnesses, they cannot retract that agreement. But now we've rejected that, and Rabbi Lazar, biva hu v'achar leposlan. No, what we're dealing with is where Stan comes with Mark to come to invalidate one of my witnesses, my multiple witnesses. So Kol kamine nogea be'edusohu. How in the world could Stan come and do that? Isn't he nogea be'edus? Isn't he involved? Doesn't he have a bias in this testimony? Isn't his testimony partial? So Amarav Acha Brei de Rav Ika Kagon Shikara Alav Arar. No, it's talking about where he's revealing some kind of complaint about the person. Arar demai. Well, what kind of complaint are you talking about? Ilema arar de gazlanusa. If you're going to say that my witnesses are thieves and therefore they shouldn't be believed, kol kamine, is that going to work? No gea be'eduzohu. He's still the limitation is subject to disqualification because Stan is partial to our case. He cannot be believed for what he's saying about my witnesses. Ela arar de pagamishpacha. So rather, we have to say that we're dealing with a flaw associated with lineage. Rabbi Meir Savar, Hani Amishpacha Kamasaade, V'iyu Memela Kafaso. That when Stan says that my witnesses are actually, and Rashi explains what kind of psul are we talking about in the mishpacha, we're dealing with a problem in the family. Meaning that it turns out, as Rashi says, that the family are slaves that were never freed. And you know what? Slaves who are never freed are not allowed to be witnesses. And so as a result, because Stan is not testifying about the person in my witness specifically, but rather he's testifying about the overall family. So Rabbi Meir says that is not considered a nogea be'edus situation, and therefore his testimony will be believed. V'Rabbanan savrei sof nogea be'edusohu. Nonetheless, in the end of the day, he is disqualifying my individual witness, and that is considered too much like the a partial testimony, and therefore a partisan testimony, and therefore we're going to say that that's not acceptable. All right, so that's explanation number 2 of the last case in our Mishnah, in order to be consistent with Rabbi Yochanan. Kiyasa Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So when Rav Dimi came, he said that Rabbi Yochanan himself gave the following explanation: Machlosus b'shtei kitei edim. That actually our argument is where we had 2 sets of witnesses, where I come to court and I say to Stan, by the way, Stan, I don't just have 1 set of witnesses that show that you owe me $1,000. I've got 2 sets of witnesses. So the Rabbi Meir Savar Tzarach Levarer. Rabbi Meir says that I have to bring both sets. Once I tell the court that I've got 2 sets of witnesses that I could bring, I have to bring both sets. And therefore, if Stan wants to testify against one of my sets of witnesses, he's allowed to do so. Because now that testimony is not actually nogea be'edus, because it doesn't actually undermine my case.
Right.
And so therefore, we're going to allow Rabbi Meir Rabbi Meir is going to allow the litigant, allow Stan to testify in that situation. The rabbis, however, say that just because I said that I've got 2 sets of witnesses, I do not need to bring both sets. I could bring just 1 set of witnesses. Aval b'kat achat. And so as a result, because I could bring 1 set of witnesses, and now Stan is trying to testify about my 1 set of witnesses, I can say, you can't testify, you're nogea be'edus, you're involved in the matter. So as a result, he would not be allowed to. But aval b'kat achat, but if everybody agrees that if I come in and I tell the court that I only have 1 set of witnesses, everybody agrees that in that situation, Stan would not be able to nullify my witnesses. So Amr Lafanav Rav Ami v'Rav Asi. So Rav Ami and Rav Asi effectively asked in front of Rabbi Yochanan, Ein sham elakas achas mahu. What happens if there's only 1 set of witnesses? 1 second, that question makes no sense. We already said that there's only 1 set of witnesses, then it doesn't work. Ein sham elakas achas. We already gave the answer that if there's 1 set of witnesses, Stan definitely can't testify. No. What Rav Ami and Rav Asi were asking is the following: Ella nimtzes kashniya krovin opsulin. What happens if Stan doesn't testify against my 2nd set, but somebody else comes and now testifies against my 2nd set? And so as a result, it turns out that Stan nullified my first set of witnesses. Stan with somebody else nullified my first set of witnesses. And two other witnesses nullified my second set of witnesses. So now I have no witnesses. But Stan, if we had known this, and if I had brought my witnesses in the other order, Stan would never have been allowed to testify against my witnesses because he would be no Geya Be'edus. So what about in this situation? Is it true that just because I gave my witnesses in the reverse order that they could end up being both disqualified? And the answer is yes. Amar Lahen. Rabbi Yochanan said back to them, Kfar Ha'idu Eidim Arishonim. Stan and his fellow witness already testified against my first set of witnesses, and therefore they are already nullified, and I'm out of luck, as they say. Ika da Amri, Amar of Ashi, Kfar Ha'idu Eidim Arishonim. It wasn't Rabbi Yochanan who said it, but it was Rav Ashi who said it. But the bottom line, same answer to the question. Well, Nema Bapluta the Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Kamiflaki. Well, 1 second. This argument about whether or not, if I say I have 2 points of proof, I have to bring both of them, is a machlokas that we have seen before. In fact, we saw it back in Bava Metzia. That the Tanya, we have a brisa that says Habalidon bishtaru b'chazaka, that if you come with if one litigant says that they're on the land and Stan is the defendant, and he says, this is my land, I have witnesses that I've been here for 3 years, and I have the deed that shows that you gave me the property. Nidon bishtar divrei Rebbe. Rebbe says that you need to have the deed. That even though you said you have chazaka, and chazaka is not enough any longer, because you told the court that you have the deed, you have to show the deed. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel Omer nidon b'chazaka. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says no. A chazaka is fine. You get judged by chazaka. Chazaka below star. And we asked about that. Does Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel mean that a chazaka is the only thing that's sufficient and a contract is not? No, of course not. Ela ema af b'chazaka. No, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel allows either, meaning that when Stan says that he has chazaka and the document, so the court will accept either one. He doesn't need to bring both. But Rebbe says, no, once Stan says that he has witnesses and a document, effectively he needs to bring the more powerful piece of evidence that he claims he has. And we explained that this argument is really about whether or not you have to bring the proof of things that you say, of claims that you make. And so with Rebbe saying that you have to bring the proof, and Rebbe Shimon ben Gamliel saying that you don't. So Rebbe is like the Rebbe Meir in our Mishnah, because Rebbe Meir in our Mishnah says that I need to bring both sets of witnesses, and therefore Stan has the ability to nullify my first set because that's not determinative. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is like the Rabbanan, because Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, you don't need to bring both sets of witnesses. You don't need to bring both the chazaka and the document. You can just bring the chazaka. And so too here, you don't need to bring both sets of witnesses. So isn't this machlokas between Rebbe Meir and the Chachamim in our Mishnah just like the machlokas between Rebbe and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel back there in Bava Basra that we saw very recently, Daf Kuf Samach Tet Amabet? So the answer is no. Lo. Aliba de Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Kulei Amalo Pligi. No, look, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who says in the case of the machlokas about a land where where Stan says that he has a document and chazaka, and the Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says just giving the chazaka is sufficient. So then clearly in our case, he would agree that you don't need to bring the second set of witnesses. But Ki Pligi, where do Rebbe Meir and the rabbis disagree? Aliba de Rebbe. They argue about Rebbe. The Rebbe Meir Rebbe Meir says, let's just apply Rebbe simply. Rebbe Meir over there in the excuse me, in the land case says that bringing the deed or chazaka, if you say you have both, you have to bring both. You effectively have to bring the deed. So too here, when he says that you have two sets of witnesses, you have to bring both. But the rabbis of the Rabbanan Amrilach, the rabbis would say, no, you don't have to bring both. Why? Ad kan lo ka'amar Rebbe hasam ela b'chazaka. When Rebbe says that you need to bring the document, that's because of the nature of chazaka. How does a chazaka work? This will do a 2-second review of what we learned in Bava Basra. If I say I was on this property for 3 years and it's mine, that is not enough. I have to explain how I got here. I cannot just walk into your property and say, oh, well, I didn't see any owner. I didn't see anybody using the property. I came in, I've been using it for 3 years, so now it's mine. That is not sufficient. I have to have a taina. I have to have a claim that I bought it, that it was given to me as a gift. I have to have a claim that's associated with it. And that claim effectively suggests the existence of a document. Now, a chazaka allows me to have sufficient evidence, say that I have sufficient evidence, even though I've lost that document. And that's why we said that we need 3 years, because a person is likely to keep the document for 3 years. But after 3 years, we say that you have a chazaka. But that is a very different situation from the two witnesses. Because when I say I have a chazaka and I have a deed, the chazaka itself is in place of the deed. So as a result, when I say I have the deed, I have to bring the thing that's the true essence of my claim. Whereas if I say I have two sets of witnesses, each set of witnesses is completely independent of the other. And so as a result, each set of witnesses stands on its own. So the rabbis could say, listen, I understand that Rebbe would say that if you say you have chazaka and a document, the chazaka is really about the document, so you need to bring the document. But if a person says, I've got two sets of witnesses, you don't need to bring the second set of witnesses. Each of those witnesses are on their own and independent. And so as a result, ad kan lo ka'amar Rebbe hasam ela b'chazaka, demikoach shtarakasi, because the whole power of a chazaka comes from the document itself. Aval hacha dahani edim lav mikoach edim achrini kasu. These one set of witnesses have nothing to do with the other set of witnesses. It's not as if the first set is based on the second set, or the second set is based on the first set. So therefore, afilu Rebbe moda de ein tzarich levar. So as a result, even Rebbe would agree that you don't need to bring proof. So as a result, we now have a second possible explanation of our Mishnah that actually works. Again, we rejected Reish Lakish's approach. We're trying to explain within Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, again, all the way back, Rabbi Yochanan says that our Mishnah in the second case is talking about secular courts, and the ability to reject a judge is based on the fact that they're not an expert, according to Rebbe Meir. But if they were an expert, they wouldn't be able to judge. They wouldn't be able to reject them. And that caused a problem for us, because how then do we understand the third case where you can reject witnesses? And so we gave Reish Lakish's approach, which was rejected. But then we gave two other approaches. One was about the nature of the families, and Stan is testifying with somebody else about the fact that my witnesses actually were slaves, and as a result, it's not about my witnesses themselves, but about their families. And so Rebbe Meir says that that's okay for Stan to do, and therefore my witnesses are invalid, and he can invalidate them. Or, according to Rav Dimi in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Stan is testifying in a situation where I say I have two sets of witnesses, and Rabbi Meir says I have to bring in both sets, and so therefore Stan has the ability to nullify the first set of witnesses. But the Chachamim say no. Even though I said I had two sets of witnesses, since I only have to bring in one, Stan does not have the ability to nullify even a single set of my witnesses, and that's the machlokas. Now, for the third, a potential approach of that Ravin brings in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, you're going to need to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf.
Can you just the last section? Just repeat that again, and as concise as possible? It gets a little bit
It is
confusing.
very confusing,
And the-
especially because we're really answering a question on the first explanation of the second case in the Mishnah. But the bottom line is that according to Rav Dimi, we are saying that Rabbi Yochanan would say the following. The second case in our Mishnah is about whether or not you can reject a non-mumcha judge. Okay, the Rabbi Meir says you can. The Chachamim say you can't. What about the case of rejecting witnesses? Because witnesses are like mumchim. So we have two answers. One is offered by Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar says we're dealing with a situation where the litigant is trying to question the family origin of the witnesses, and because it's not about the individual witness, Rabbi Meir says that's okay, and the Chachamim say that's not okay. And according to Rav Dimi, we're not talking about one set of witnesses. We're talking about a situation where the plaintiff says that they have two sets of witnesses. And the question is, do you need to bring in both sets of witnesses? Rabbi Meir says you do need to bring in both sets of witnesses, and therefore, because Rabbi Meir says you need to bring in both sets, the other litigant has the right to try and nullify the first set because they're not nullifying the entire case. And according to the Chachamim, you don't need to bring in the second set of witnesses, and therefore the litigant does not have the ability to nullify the first set of witnesses. Again, the machlokus in our Mishnah was Rabbi Meir says that a litigant can nullify, can reject the witnesses of the other party, and the Chachamim say you can't. So the question is how do we understand what case is it that they're arguing about? And so again, Rav Dimi says that we're dealing with a situation where they brought in, where the plaintiff says that they have two sets of witnesses, and so as a result, Rabbi Meir says you can reject the other litigant can reject the first set, and the Chachamim is saying no, because the litigant doesn't have to bring in both sets. If you reject the first set, that's not acceptable. And according to Rabbi Lazar, again, we're dealing with the family origin, and therefore the question is whether the family origin is considered being Nogeya B'Davar or not. Rabbi Meir says it's not Nogeya B'Davar because it's about the entire family, and the and the Chachamim say no. At the end of the day, you're rejecting this witness. That's Nogeya B'Davar. We're going to prevent you from rejecting that witness.
Normally say that al pishnaim or shlosha edim. So it should be enough that if a person has one set of edim, and that edim was plural, that would be two at least, then
Yep.
Why do we even need to bring a discussion about another set of edim?
Well, that's exactly the machlokus. The question is if you come to court and say, I have two sets of witnesses, there is a machlokus as to whether or not you need to bring both sets of witnesses. We saw a very similar machlokus at the end of Maseches Bava Basra, that we saw that Rebbe Shimon ben Gamliel and Rebbe argued about a case where I try to take you to court. I say, you're on my land. You say, I have a chazaka and I have a document. Rebbe says, you need to actually bring the document. Even though if you hadn't referenced the document and you just said you had a chazaka, it would be sufficient for you to bring in the witnesses of a chazaka. Because you mentioned the document, you now need to bring in the document. Similarly here, Rabbi Meir says that if you say you have two sets of witnesses, you need to bring in both sets. And therefore, because Rabbi Meir says you need to bring in both sets, Rabbi Meir allows me to negate and to testify against your first set of witnesses because they aren't necessary to the case.
So what? So he can't. Would he have the right to negate the second set of witnesses or not?
No. That was the question. That the point is that if you had not mentioned two sets of witnesses, you would only mentioned one set of witnesses. Everybody agrees I couldn't testify against them. And once the first set has been knocked out and you bring the second set, I can't testify against them. But that's what the argument is about: the ability to testify against the first set. All right, we'll pick up
Then
from there.
again,
I'm
it
going to do a
sounds
little
some,
bit of review, God willing, tomorrow because we're in the middle of a discussion. So I'm going to use the beginning of tomorrow to sort of set us up for the fourth and final approach that allows us to understand again, that is consistent
it
with Rabbi
sounds
Yochanan's explanation of the second Machlokes.
it sounds a little bit like a voir dire.
Yes, it does sound a little bit like a voir dire. Yes. I mean, there are a lot of differences as well, but I hear the analogy that you're trying to make. Yes. But you know, the point is that if in fact you had said that you only have one set of witnesses, I wouldn't have been able to do that voir dire. So it's not that, like I said, it's not perfect, but I understand you're absolutely right that there is an aspect of voir dire associated with it. All right. Looking forward to continuing our learning together. Have a great day, everybody.